Welcome back to our Obscure and Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg series. If you're new, a link to the Iceberg playlist will be provided in the description, as well as a link to the iceberg itself. As always, I would like to thank our channel members who help make these videos possible. You can also become a member by clicking the join button, or you can help support the channel by simply subscribing and leaving a like. Now that that's out the way, let's dive in. We begin our descent in early 1900s New Orleans, Louisiana, where an individual known as the Axeman was striking fear into the hearts of the New Orleans locals. To be more specific, during the years of 1918 and 1919, the New Orleans Axeman would take the lives of 6 individuals and injure 6 more. The victims of the Axeman were mainly of Italian descent, and he would not take anything from the homes, though despite the number of attacks, the Axeman would never be found. The first attack happened on May 23, 1918, where a young Italian couple, Catherine Maggio and her husband, Joseph Maggio, were both asleep in their apartment. Unbeknownst to them, the Axeman would soon break into their home, sneak into their room, where he would slit the throats of both Catherine and Joseph. Afterwards, he would strike them both with an axe. Police would find bloody clothes left behind by the killer, but even after questioning multiple people, were left with no leads. The second attack would happen a little over a month later. This time, the victims were Louis Bessemer and his mistress Harriet Lowe. Louis owned a grocery store and lived in an apartment attached to the back of the store. And on the morning of June 27th in 1918, nobody would be there to open up the store, and so locals began to worry. Not long after, police would find the pair laying in a bloody pool. But they were alive. Louis had been struck with an axe on his temple, and Harriet was hit above the ear. Louis would go on to make a fast recovery, but Harriet would be in the hospital for a little longer, ultimately passing away on August 7th in 1918. But before she would pass away, she would tell authorities that she believed Louis was the one who attacked her. Despite Louis' claim of innocence, police did eventually take him in, and he was charged with murder. He would end up spending 9 months in jail before being acquitted on May 1st of 1919. 2 more attacks would happen in August. One being Anna Schneider, who at the time of her attack was 8 months pregnant. Anna was struck multiple times on her head with an axe, but thankfully, her husband did find her once he returned from work and got her to the hospital, where she gave birth to her daughter 2 days later. But once she recovered, she had no memory of what had happened, and so was unable to help investigators. And 5 days later, a man named Joseph Romano would be found by his family members after he had been struck over the head with an axe. He would be taken to the hospital, but would succumb to his injuries 2 days after. Though this time, the family did manage to catch a glimpse of the attacker. They described him as a very tall man who wore a suit and also a slouched hat. This would be the last attack in 1918, and by now, the public was in a frenzy. For 7 whole months, there would be no attacks, but this peace would be disrupted on March 10th, 1919, when couple Charles and Rosie Cortomiglia, as well as their infant daughter, were attacked inside of their home. Their 69-year-old neighbor, Orlando Giordano, would hear the commotion as they were being attacked and would head over to check on his neighbors, where he would find Charles and Rosie on the floor. Their infant daughter had passed away in her mother's arms. Charles and Rosie would receive medical attention, and Charles would be discharged from the hospital 2 days after the attack. Rosie did have to stay for a little bit longer, but after she was healed, she told investigators that the people who attacked her were Orlando and his 18-year-old son, Frank. But the thing is, Charles denied these accusations and actually stood up for Orlando and his son. This, however, would not stop the police from arresting Orlando and Frank, where they would be charged with murder and later found guilty. Frank was sentenced to death by hanging, and Orlando was sentenced to life in prison. This angered Charles, and after the trial was over, he would go on to divorce Rosie. In a strange turn of events, Rosie would actually confess that she had lied about Orlando and Frank, stating that she had done this because of spite and jealousy. Orlando and his son would be released from prison, but despite this being a good thing for them, this situation only helped the real Axeman get away with yet another attack. Around this time, there was news that a letter from the Axeman himself had made its way to the public. In the letter, the Axeman claimed to be an evil spirit and would encourage locals to play jazz music if they wanted to avoid him attacking them. The letter read like this: Hell, March 13th, 1919. Esteemed mortal, they have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible. Even as the ether surrounds your earth, I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleans and you foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know who they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, besmeared with blood and brains of he who I have sent below to keep me company. If you wish, you may tell the police to be careful not to rile me. Of course, I am a responsible spirit. I take no offense at the way they have conducted their investigations in the past. In fact, they may have been so utterly stupid as to not only amuse me, but His Satanic Majesty, Francis Joseph. But tell them to beware. Let them not try to discover what I am, for it were better that they were never born than to incur the wrath of the Axeman. I don't think there is any need of such a warning, for I feel the police will always dodge me, as they have in the past. They are wise, and know how to keep away from all harm. Undoubtedly, you Orleans think of me as the most horrible murderer, which I am, but I could be much worse if I wanted to. If I wished, I could pay a visit to your city every night. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in a close relationship with the Angel of Death. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Tartarus, and it is about time to leave your earthly home, I will cease my discourse, hoping that thou wilt publish it, that it may go well with thee. I have been, am, and will be the worst spirit that ever existed, either in fact or realm of fantasy. Signed, the Axeman. On this night, jazz music played throughout the city, and no attacks from the Axeman were reported. Of course, there is no evidence that this letter did come from the Axeman himself. This very well could have been some form of dark prank, but the attacks were real, and so the locals were not going to take any chances. 2 months after Charles and Rosie's attack, a man named Steve Boca was struck in his sleep inside of his own home. Steve managed to regain consciousness and saw that his head had been seriously hurt. He walked all the way to his neighbor's house where his neighbor was able to contact help. He would recover, but he would have no memory of his attacker. On September 2nd in 1919, the Axeman had a seemingly failed attack when he would break into the home of William Carson, who shot at them, causing them to flee. But this would not stop them, because the very next day, on September 3rd, the Axeman would strike again. This time, he would attack 19-year-old Sarah Lawson, who thankfully survived, but, just like many of the other victims, had absolutely no memory of who the person that attacked her was. Which brings us to the last known Axeman attack, and it happened on October 27th, 1919, when a man named Mike Pepitone would be found in his bedroom lying in a pool of blood by his wife. This attack was particularly gory, as blood was said to have been all over the room. Mike's wife did catch a glimpse of the attacker as they were fleeing, but was unable to give investigators a good description, other than that they were a large man. This was likely due to the shock of finding her husband in the state that she did. Through each attack, police were never able to get a real lead, and so the case still remains unsolved. This situation caused many to believe that the attacks were actually mafia hits, while others believed that the attack was racially motivated. This is because in the early 1900s, many Italians were immigrating to New Orleans to work in the sugarcane fields, and began growing Italian communities in and around the New Orleans area. In the end, the Axeman was never caught, and remains a local legend. It is very likely that by now, the real Axeman has passed away, seeing as how this was over 100 years ago. But this has not stopped investigators from attempting to close the case and bring closure to the community. Maybe soon, with modern forensic technology, we may be able to get the answers, but until then, the case remains unsolved. There is a website online called Gandalf.com that has been around for over 20 years. The only problem is that in its entire existence it has not been updated, and if you were to visit the page, you would be greeted with a very disturbing image. A Redditor would post about this on the r/Unresolved Mysteries subreddit. What is Gandalf.com? Why has it remained up for 22 years? In 2013, I was in an elementary school computer class, messing around on them with some friends. We began entering random URLs into the search bar, and randomly stumbled into Gandalf.com. Warning, it's a little creepy. The site itself has very little on it, only a bizarre painting at the end of a stone/wood hallway. If you click anywhere on the page, it zooms into the scene and close to the painting, displaying a message saying, "Gandalf is busy. Please go away." If you were to click it again, it brings up the link to an email address, ourqs@gandalf.com. I did send an email about 9 days ago, but never got any response. I had forgotten about the site until a few days ago, when I spoke to one of my old friends and he brought up the subject. It had stayed the exact same the whole time. Upon revisiting the site, I thought this time to do a little digging into it, and found more questions than answers. One of the first things I thought to do was check the Wayback Machine and see the history of the site. The first captures are from 1998, and it was a Mattel company offshoot. As far as I can tell, the capture was very incomplete, before the domain became available for purchase. The first capture on this site in its current form is from October 8th, 2000. The site has been the exact same for 22 years. It's a bizarre fact about the site, but that doesn't really answer anything. The next thing I did was look for other Reddit threads and found this 2-year-old post on r/arg asking a similar question. People there apparently started a Discord. They had a link, though it is expired, and I'm not familiar enough with Discord to figure out how to get the Discord page. One person in the comments claimed that the creator was a crazy drug addict who thinks he's Jesus. There's also an archived/X thread talking about it, but still no answers there. I'm not the most tech-savvy guy out there, so I'm out of ideas of where to look for further answers. I don't think it's an ARG, and if it is a crazy junkie, then why has he paid to keep the site up for so long? After reading this, obviously the very first thing I did was go visit the site, where I was greeted with this. Spooky, but other than this, there is really nothing else on the website. When you click anywhere, it does just as the OP said. It zooms in onto the image. If you click again, you are greeted with the email address. But for what reason would somebody keep the website running for so long? I myself have never hosted a web page, but I do know that it does cost money to keep them running. But what's the point if the web page contains nothing? One commenter would provide a very simple theory, to which I believe could possibly be the answer. If there's been no updates, maybe it was a planned project that the creator never got around to, but doesn't want to lose the domain name. I haven't had my website functional in 5 years, but I keep paying for the name, and then forgetting about it until I get a renewal notice, LOL. And this is what I think is the likely answer. The website owner probably intended to do something, but as you know with life, things change. The webpage owner could also be holding on to the domain name in an effort to sell it later on in the future, as many domain names have been known to go for a lot of money. Names like voice.com and insurance.com have sold for over $30 million, so it's very likely that someone out there is holding out, and the email address could be intended for those who want to buy the domain name. But what I don't understand is the image choice on the webpage. It could be to invoke some form of curiosity, or maybe the owner just doesn't care and wanted to put something creepy on there because they thought it was funny. Overall, not the creepiest thing on the internet, but still a pretty interesting find. Victor Goddard was born on February 6, 1897. After graduating from St. George's School in Harpenden, he joined the Royal Navy, later going on to join the Royal Navy Air Service in 1915. From here, he would rise the ranks until he became Deputy Director of Intelligence for the Air Ministry in 1935. But aside from his military career, Victor Goddard is famous for having witnessed a number of premonition-like and paranormal experiences during his life. One of Victor's most popular experiences happened in 1935, when he was tasked with the mission to go inspect an abandoned Scottish airfield. According to the story, Victor flew over to the area where the airfield was located, but encountered heavy rain and harsh weather conditions that all of a sudden stopped. Victor was met with clear skies, and he then spotted the abandoned airstrip, only it was not abandoned. Victor had reported that there were crew workers dressed in blue jumpsuits as well as yellow painted planes on the runway. But the problem was that upon later inspection, that airfield was abandoned, and it appeared as though Victor had somehow mistaken what he believed to have seen. At the time, planes in the Royal Naval Air Service were typically silver, and yellow painted planes were not that common. Also, the uniforms that the crew wore at that station at the time that it was operational were not blue and instead were tan. It wouldn't be until 4 years later that that airstrip got renovated, the crew got new blue jumpsuits, and the planes were painted yellow, just like Victor had seen when he flew over 4 years prior. This incident has been labeled as a time slip, as many believe that Victor may have somehow slipped into a different timeline when he encountered the harsh weather conditions. Victor would have other notable experiences, one happening in a party in Shanghai, China that was being hosted in his honor. At this party, Captain Gerald Gladstone would tell people about a dream he had had involving Victor. In the dream, Victor would be in a plane above Asia when atmospheric icing would cause the plane to crash, resulting in everybody losing their lives. Victor had overheard Gerald telling this story to guests at the party, and funnily enough, would soon find himself on a plane that was experiencing harsh weather conditions. The weather conditions were so bad that the plane ultimately had to crash land in Japan, but luckily Victor and everybody else on board made it out okay, unlike in Gerald's dream. These and other experiences like these greatly affected Victor's life. He eventually went on to write about his experiences in his book, Flight Towards Reality. His story grew so popular that a movie about his flight premonition was made in 1955. It was called The Night My Number Came Up. Despite the criticisms, Victor would go on to become a prominent figure in the UFO and paranormal communities, later going on to pass away at the age of 89 on January 21st, 1987. But his story would live on for those who believe in the paranormal, even to this day. In the New Hamburg area is a famous home known as the John Lawson House. Built in the mid-1800s, the home has been associated with two tragedies and is also famous for the mysterious mannequins that seemed to move around the home completely on their own from 2005 till around 2016. But before we get into that, let's start at the beginning. New Hamburg was experiencing major growth in the mid-1800s. Many of the more affluent New Yorkers were moving up north and building homes. That would include John Lawson and his family. In 1845, John Lawson finished construction of the home, and it sat in the Main Street Historic District. For about 2 decades, the family would enjoy life there. Around the same time the home was being constructed, the New Hamburg Railroad Station was also finished and opened up. It would be the site of a terrible accident in 1871. February 6, 1871. A train carrying oil was heading southbound from Albany and set to pass through New Hamburg. At the same time, a passenger train is going northbound from New York and also set to pass through New Hamburg. Both trains are set to cross each other's paths. But on the train carrying oil, a broken axle failed, causing some of the train cars containing the oil to derail and fall onto the parallel tracks. The train engineers on the passenger train tried to slow it down, but by this time, it was already too late. The passenger train would crash into the oil cars, causing a fiery explosion that would take the lives of 22 individuals. This incident happened less than 200 feet from the Lawson house. The second incident occurred 6 years later on May 3, 1877, when another fire would break out near the Lawson home. It's believed that the fire originated at a local general store that had a room full of kerosene in it. The light bulb wasn't patented until 1880, and kerosene lamps were still seen as a popular source of lighting at this time. Unfortunately, when the kerosene room caught fire, the fuel exploded, spreading and intensifying the fire to all of the nearby buildings. Despite the townspeople's efforts to put it out, the fire would burn down 7 buildings, all surrounding the John Lawson house, which somehow remained untouched. Ownership of the home stayed in the Lawson family during the 1850s, and the home was renovated in 1950 and again in 2005. But as of now, the current owners of the home are not known. This brings us to the mannequins. It is after the renovations in the early 2000s that people began to notice these mannequins in front of the home. The mannequins would be dressed in vintage clothing that some believed was from the era of the train incident. And the mannequins would always be found in different poses, but nobody would ever be there to witness them being set up in the positions that they were found. The story that the souls of those who passed away were now inhabiting the mannequins and causing them to move began to grow. And it would be further fueled when one day, the mannequins were found posed facing in the supposed direction that the accident had occurred. This would go on for around a decade, and the entire time, nobody saw anybody moving the mannequins, let alone living at the home. Eventually, in 2016, the mannequins just disappeared and never returned. Of course, this is the kind of story that takes the internet by storm, and so many have tried to crack the case of who was behind the mannequins. I was able to find this webpage in which the author states they were able to find property records that showed the home had been sold in January 2003 and again in October of 2015, which lines up roughly with the mannequins appearing and disappearing from around 2005 till 2016. Given this information, I think it's safe to assume that the owners during the 2003 and 2015 timeframe were the ones who were moving the mannequins. It is possible that the Lawson home owners intended to pay homage to those who lost their lives, and since nobody was ever seen sitting the mannequins up, the legend grew quickly. According to this webpage, the 2003 owners moved nearby after the 2015 sale and can even be found with some real estate sleuthing, but I will not be naming them or trying to look for them for the sake of their privacy. In the end, the only real question about this is, what was the real motive? Why did the owners take so much effort to move the mannequins around, and why did they take so much effort to not be seen? As I said earlier, they could have been trying to commemorate the train incident, or maybe this is just how they like to decorate their yard. The house was listed again in 2017, but removed from the market shortly after. A look on Zillow shows us a newly modernized inside, though to this day, 7 years since the listing was removed, and at the time of this recording, the home remains off the market. July 24th, 1989. 2 Japanese hikers are lost on Mount Asahidake. Luckily for them, the Japanese authorities in the area regularly do mountain rescues, and so they dispatch a helicopter to go search for the missing pair. While in the air, the rescue team spots a large SOS sign and begins to look in this area. The SOS sign was made of very large birch tree logs that were around 16 feet long, and about 2 miles from the sign, the rescue team was able to locate the missing pair. The hikers were picked up, the rescue gave them food and water, and then they praised them for constructing such a good sign and how it had helped find them. But this confused the hikers. They looked at each other, looked back to the rescue, and said, "We didn't make that sign." Somehow, this sign had managed to be spotted by the rescue team, and these hikers were lucky to have been in the area when they saw it. But this brought up another issue. If the hikers weren't the ones who made the SOS sign, then somebody else must have. And if the hikers were now safe, then the other person who made the sign might still be out there. And so the very next morning, the rescue team set out to do another search. During this search, the area of the SOS sign was investigated, where they found some shocking discoveries. In the area near the sign, police found remains of human bones. Many had markings made by animals on them, but also, they found a small hole. Inside that hole was a backpack that contained a notebook, some camera gear, a tape recorder, and cassette tapes. They also found a human skull and the ID of 25-year-old Kenji Iwamura. Kenji had gone missing 5 years prior, and investigators concluded that he must have been the one who made the sign. The police then sent the bones to the medical examiners, but when they got the results back, the examiners had told the police that they did not believe these were the bones of the male Kenji, and instead the bones of a woman. This would cause a lot of confusion in the case, but the bones would be sent to be re-examined, and after, it was concluded that these did belong to Kenji. But now the only question remaining was, how exactly did he lose his life? Which brings us to the cassette tapes. Upon inspection, the police found that the cassette tapes contained a plea for help. Obviously, that was in Japanese, but the full message translates to, "I'm on a cliff and can't move. SOS, help me. I'm on a cliff and can't move. SOS, help me. I'm at the spot where I first saw the helicopter. The bamboo grass is too deep, and I can't go anywhere. Please, lift me up from here." But these cassettes would only raise more questions than bring answers. For starters, the person on the recording states that they are stuck on a cliff, but the SOS sign and the remains were not anywhere near a cliff. In fact, the area that they were in is relatively flat. The recording was also played for Kenji's family, but they were not able to confirm if this was his voice or not. There have been multiple theories about how Kenji passed away, and even if he made the sign or not. I believe that it could have been Kenji who made the sign, and maybe after he made the sign, he went up to a cliff to try to get a better look to see if there was any rescue nearby. This is where he would get stuck, and ultimately make the voice recording. But unfortunately for Kenji, rescue didn't show up, and he lost his life, either due to harsh weather, animal intervention, or maybe even starvation. Hearing the cries for help on the voice recording is chilling, and despite the fact that the family could not confirm that it was Kenji, I still believe that it could have been him. If Kenji was lost and extremely exhausted, then it's very possible that his voice may have sounded weaker than normal on the recording, or if he was yelling very hard for rescue, it is also very possible that his voice could have sounded very harsh. To my knowledge, the sign is still up. I tried to look it up on Google Maps but was unable to get a close enough view to actually see the sign. But today, it serves as a reminder to those who challenge the mountain that at any point, it may take your life. Of course, there has been a ton of sensationalism surrounding this story, but the most likely and simple answer is that Kenji was the person who made the sign. And our final entry into the third tier is the story of the Loretto Chapel staircase. The story begins in 1873. The Loretto Chapel was commissioned to be built and it would take about 5 years to finish construction. But before it was completed, the area upstairs designated for the choir needed a staircase to be able to access it. According to the story, multiple builders were consulted, but none of them could figure out how to make it work with their limited space. And so, left with no other options, the nuns prayed for 9 whole days. This type of praying is known as a novena and represents the 9 days between the Feast of Ascension and the Pentecost. Finally, on the 9th and final day, an unknown man walked into the chapel and offered to build a staircase for the nuns. According to the story, the man showed up with a donkey, minimal tools, and asked to work completely alone. There are some versions of the story that claim that this man built the staircase overnight, others that claim he built it in 2 days, and others that claim he built it over the course of a couple of weeks. But obviously, none of this is able to be confirmed. When he did finish the staircase, the unknown man just simply disappeared. He took his tools, he didn't ask for any money, and he didn't give his name. At least that's how the story goes. The staircase itself is a work of art. The builder was talented, but not just talented, they were a true master of this craft. The staircase was held together using only wood, no nails or glue. There are a total number of 33 steps, which would also be the same age of Jesus Christ at the time of his death. The staircase also features not just one, but 2 360-degree turns, which is not something that is very easy to do, especially considering that this builder had allegedly done it alone and without many tools. Originally, the staircase did not have a railing, but one was added later on, as well as metal support, but this was more of a precaution and not something that was necessary at the time. How the staircase has managed to stay up for so long has puzzled many, and to make it even weirder, the wood that it is made from is believed to be a type of spruce wood, but it is not native to the New Mexico area. The exact species of spruce was not able to be identified either, so how it got to the chapel and this staircase remains a mystery. Obviously, because of this story, there are many who believe that the man who built the staircase was St. John himself, and the construction of the staircase is nothing short of a miracle. Though a Santa Fe historian named Mary Jean Cook would claim that they believed the mystery carpenter was a man named Francois Jean Rochas, who was a French master carpenter, and Francois' name was in the chapel logbook, indicating that he had done some work for them at some point in time. Unfortunately, Francois did lose his life early as a result of a murder, but in the Santa Fe New Mexican newspaper, he would be credited with building the staircase when they reported about his death. To my knowledge, this has not been officially confirmed by anybody at the church. Currently, the chapel has been transformed into a museum, giving anybody the opportunity to look at the staircase with their own eyes, but I am curious to hear what you think. Do you believe that the staircase is a religious miracle? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And that wraps up the third tier in our Iceberg series. If you made it this far, leave a like. And as always, thanks for watching.